Welcome back, everybody. It's another episode of Fuck That Guy.
Fuck that guy. It's our episode of Fuck That Guy.
The Mindful CEO here, Chris Angel, coming at you with Aaron Hendon. Hello, Aaron.
Hey, man, what's up? We're not talking about each other. We're talking about the guest that didn't show up today.
Oh God,
So,
I love our green room times, man. There's nothing
yes,
like it.
nothing like it. Yes,
Yes,
we'll have to start recording those and do those as bloopers at the end.
that'd be,
I bet that would
that would be
get,
amazing,
we could go from tens of listeners to
dude.
dozens
People
like
would listen
that,
just for the bloopers. They would listen just for the green
just for
room.
the bloopers. Um, yeah. So,
Set us up. Set us up.
okay. Well, I had an insight about insights. So this is super, but lest you think this is going to be an intellectual exercise in just insights, it really is a really where how to nurture insights into practical action, into
Yeah.
practical solutions. Um, so that's what I wanted to talk about is the different tools or methodologies or spaces you need to create or could create that would give you room. I think anything you want to say about that before I go off on some
I have
weird
thoughts,
tangent?
but I'm
Yeah.
saving them for later.
Okay, fine.
Stick
Save those.
around, everybody. Stick around for later.
Stick
I
around
have
for
thoughts.
Chris's thoughts. Um, on Aaron's insane ramblings. I was thinking about, we're as CEOs, as marketers, as people, as creating something, our own businesses, our own lives, CEO of at least our family,
Yep.
at least the wives are, the men are the
Fuck
the
that guy.
bottle, fuck that guy, the
Yeah,
bottle
okay.
washers. I forget the comedian's name, but he was like, "Yeah, happy wife, happy life." That's a real,
Oh
that's true. But there's no happy husband saying. There's no reciprocal one. For my wife, it would be happy husband. We'll see about that.
God.
So yeah, so we're CEOs of our own lives, and which means we're visionaries. We're creating something, or you're certainly not listening to the show because you're not a visionary. I mean, that
Right.
would
Yeah.
badge, you can listen to anything else. So what do you use to feel to get yourself to go from a momentary insight into something to really expanding it into something useful, to following those threads or
Yeah.
really thinking something through? What does it mean to think something through?
Mm,
Um,
right.
and apply critical thinking, like actually think about it versus just, have thoughts float by and be like, oh yeah, that'd be a good thing to do one day.
I do have a thought. Hang on. I
Yeah.
just before I forget it. So what's coming up for me in that is just I think a lot of my life had been spent having vision, thinking about something was an event and not a practice. And
Oh,
I
that's
think
a really great distinction.
one of the places we can go later as we talk about CrossFit boxes maybe is just the practice of what you're talking about. That there is a practice of visioning.
Yes.
So anyway, I was afraid I would forget that. So I wanted
No,
to
that's a brilliant thing, Chris, that thoughts as a practice, visions, thoughts, thinking as a practice versus an event. Like, oh yeah, that happened. I had this in the shower. So, I have thoughts in the shower. Everyone has thoughts in the shower, which is also biologically really super interesting to why
yeah,
you
right.
do that when your attention is just free. Thoughts happen. It's not just accidental that as a human being we have these
Right.
thoughts driving or in the shower when our mind is free to wander, free to make connections, free to play on walks, things like that, being in nature. And this came up for me particularly, and it really came up this morning. In particular, this morning, I had this real connection to the whole thing that I have been exploring. So I have my program and book, How to Live a Grateful Life in a Fucked Up World. And I've been in this iteration of it, the one that's completing tomorrow. I really didn't have session 9, which is the completion, written when I started session 1.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
didn't know. I knew the direction. I just hadn't settled on, okay, this is what this is. This is the meditation. This is the idea. This is the connection to the previous week. This is why this would be the ending, like that. And it got me thinking about, first of all, the whole design of the course and the book.
Yeah.
like how this whole thing came from. I was writing to the participants like, hey, I'm making this up as we go, which in reality we all are
Yeah.
about everything all the
All made
time.
up. Yep.
And I think that's part of this, is that just acknowledging that we are all at all times making this up as we go along is so empowering, because it takes out of the space that there's some supposed to ending to this.
Yeah.
There is a real ending that's coming. That part is not up for debate, right? That
That's it. Yeah.
ending has been written.
Yep.
But everything between here and that has not. And we're making it up as we go. And if we can acknowledge that we're making it up as we go, we can then invent tools and practices that make the inventing till we go more interesting, more
Right.
fulfilling, right?
Yeah.
If we pretend we're not,
Yeah.
which is also, I think, really useful. And that idea wouldn't have come up had we not started this conversation just now. So having a space like this,
Mm-hmm.
a dialogue space where you're free, and honestly, that's the origin of our podcast, Chris, right? Is
Right. Yeah.
we liked just talking to each other.
Yep.
Um, creating a space where you can dialogue
Yep.
freely and intentionally about thoughts you find interesting, to see if they might or might not have value, but really that if it's there to talk about, just talking about it
Yeah.
is one of the tools that you could use, you could create for yourself. And it's the point of the mindful CEO community that we're creating. It's the point of Business Church and the other communities that you've created.
Yep.
Different threads people want to pull on, and to do so in community is,
Right. Yeah.
great way to have that
You
role.
often talk about system one, system two thinking, and there really is not, in my experience or my opinion, the spaces for the system two thinking, for the place to, and so what you end up with by default is a busy life, doing the to-do list, thinking about your vision, and then going to the to-do list of your vision. And there's no real practice or space on a weekly basis to actually begin to flex the muscle. And this is why, to your point about you and I just having these podcast episodes, this for me is a practice. You and I
Totally.
have this in our calendar. We show up every week, we record an episode, and it's not just for all of you as listeners, your entertainment, though I'm sure you think it's very entertaining. This is as much for me and Aaron as it is for you. Like, this stretches me. Where else do I get to explore and take the crayon for a walk? I just love that. Harold and the
Right.
Purple Crayon,
Yeah. Well, so those are the metaphors, right? Is taking the crayon for a walk, right? Inside this domain called the Cottywomple, right? Which
Yep,
we
yep,
haven't,
yep,
bring that back, right? Is
yep.
the intent moving, what is it? Moving with intention toward a vague destination?
Yeah, purposeful manner
A
towards a vague
purposeful
destination.
manner, moving in a
Yep,
purposeful manner toward a vague destination.
yep,
And I think that's a really important aspect of the space, is that
yeah,
it's purposeful.
yeah,
You're not
yeah.
just shooting the shit. That's the other thing, is you're not just talking about the Geno Smith trade. You're not,
Right, right.
but really, I mean, and there's nothing wrong with just talking shit about the Geno Smith trade. I do that all the time, but this is purposeful,
Yeah,
and you don't know really where it's going, but you have a space to do that.
yeah, right.
That's such a big deal. And I wouldn't have had the thought that I just had, and I'm glad it's captured on tape because I've forgotten it already. But there's that, and then the thing about making thoughts an event versus,
Practice.
a process. Is that how you said it?
Practice, a
A
practice.
practice versus an event. Like, yeah, a regular occasion. Um,
Okay.
And then I was thinking, so just to go back to where this conversation this morning
Yeah,
came from, I was reflecting on where my book and the course, How to Live a Grateful Life in a Fucked Up World, started.
yeah,
And it started from my inquiries. I just had a question about what's the difference between gratitude and appreciation.
mm-hmm.
I just was curious about that because, Esther Hicks talks about appreciation and Joe Dispenza talks about gratitude. And there's some disparaging things said about gratitude in certain woo-woo communities, that gratitude has somewhat of a, there's at least a little claw on it somewhere, a little hook
Huh.
for people. And I just got interested in exploring that and thinking about that. And I started talking about it. We
Right.
talked
Right.
about it. I posted about it. I wrote about it. And then I took it to the cushion, which is really one of my favorite fancy woo metaphors, is for,
Hmm.
bringing it into meditation as a seed thought and seeing what comes.
Hmm.
And, um, I wouldn't, I would certainly have reservations about saying the book and the course are divinely guided, just because that's
Yeah.
a step too far into the woo woo woods. I'm not
Uh-huh.
quite
Okay. All
wearing
right.
that hat.
Uh-huh.
Um, but everything in it pretty much came to me in meditation. And if prayer is speaking to God and meditation is listening, then you could make the argument that it's divinely guided.
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
there's just too many connotations on it for me to
Yeah.
fully embrace
That's a
that
whole
as
rabbit trail, man. Like you are the divine. You are
exactly
incarnate, the divine incarnate. So it is
anything you do is divinely guided.
it's all
Fine,
divine,
great,
man.
that's true. Talking about the Geno Smith trait is divinely
Yeah,
guided.
yeah. I guess, yeah.
Okay, um, yeah. So but that practice of bringing it to the cushion and exploring, and it showed up this morning when I was doing my meditations because I settled on ending the course on gratitude with a conversation for generosity.
Hmm.
And that was again from various threads, various conversations I'd had with people about Eastern thought and personal, and then taking it to the cushion and really discovering for myself the relationship generosity has with gratitude. Um, and I've been exploring it in my morning gratitude meditation. So I do these morning sits
Right.
every day.
Right. Yeah.
Um, and it really showed up like this week in the last, maybe, yeah, probably the last week, 7 days. I've been really intentional about just meditating on generosity to discover whatever there is to discover. I mean, that's the thing. You
Hmm.
don't
Hmm.
go to discover something, you go to discover whatever there is to discover. If you're going to
Yeah,
discover something, then you already know the thing exists. You're looking
yeah.
for it.
Uh-huh.
It's
Uh-huh.
not a really discovery, right? It's
Uh,
the either the proving or disproving of a hypothesis, but it's not a discovery.
hmm.
You
Hmm.
know, Columbus didn't discover America. America was already here,
Uh-huh.
uh,
Right.
inhabited. It was discovered already by human beings. It's the opportunity to discover something really needs to be like, I don't know where this goes. Let me see where this
Hmm.
goes.
Hmm.
And so
Hmm.
it occurred to me this morning for the first time, like, oh, that's really why that's one of the opportunities of my daily practice on Facebook or wherever, LinkedIn and wherever else it gets posted,
Yeah. Yeah.
is what it looks like to explore something on the cushion.
Hmm. Hmm.
Like as a demonstration, this is what it feels like
Right. Right.
to explore that on the cushion and see what people show up see, because I think it's viable. So anyway, that was the seed thought for this show, is what are some of the practices. So there's the public dialogue, or at least dialogue with people, and then there's journaling,
Yep.
right, which is
Yep.
valuable, I think, in that
Yep.
context, and
Yep.
then meditation, like taking it to the cushion,
Yeah.
like real, and that could be walking, sitting, reflecting quietly at the lake, you
Uh-huh.
know, contemplation.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
anyway,
Right. Right.
big old fucking rant there.
No, it's good though, because I was just thinking about like, because what it's not is I'm gonna have my morning coffee and read a book to confirm the thing I'm already looking for, which
Definitely
is
not.
what I did for so many years in personal development, which is like I have a goal, I want to get to that goal. Give me the pieces of information I need so that I can get the goal. It was very much it wasn't discovery, it was confirmation. It was like give me the I don't know how you say that, backfilling the things I need to get the thing I want versus I think where I'm at now in life is I'm just kind of tired of that game, and I'm more interested and curious in what's here that I can't see. Like, let me sit with my question. That's why you had mentioned before we recorded, like, I like to do it in a walk. I'll think, I'll bring a thought to a walk, and I just kind of sit with it, and I look for what wants to show up. That was, I think, maybe 100 million episodes ago when we recorded. I was referenced an architect. I never remember his name, but he used to show up to a piece of land, and he'd be like, "What does this want to be?"
Oh, is that
So
Frank Lloyd Wright?
it was never predetermined. He would show up he would basically talk to the land and be like, "What wants to be here?"
Right.
And he didn't. There wasn't a preconceived idea. It was just, I mean, other than, I mean, Cottywampa, like, there's gonna be a building here because he's an architect. It's so there's a purposeful manner of, like, we're going to put something here, but a vague destination of I don't know what that thing is yet.
I don't know what
And I
that thing
kind of
looks
love
like
that.
yet.
It's just so magical to me.
Yeah, and I think that's a really generous space. You said this thing. Oh, this thing about confirmation.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, like that's the way we normally read, right? Like we're rarely reading
yeah.
opposing viewpoints.
Uh,
Like anything,
right.
that directly counter what we already think. Like I'm not
Yeah.
reading The Art of the Deal. I'm just not going to take the time
Uh-huh.
to read The Art of the Deal. I tried actually.
Yeah.
I
Back in the
couldn't.
day, or like yesterday.
Yeah, we used to do an assignment back in the ILP was
Uh-huh.
read something you don't normally read something you wouldn't read,
Uh-huh.
just to create the new neuronal pathways there. But I
Uh-huh.
felt neuronal pathways shrinking. I was like, this is unhealthy. Um,
Hmm.
but I wound up reading Eat, Pray, Love, which actually turned out to be like sort of a seminal book in my in this path, in this relatively
Wow.
late stage path, which I really would. I mean, Eat, Pray, Love would be my wife's kind of book, not my kind of book.
Uh-huh.
Um, During that phase, I also read Twilight, which
Uh-huh. Nice.
I want my time back, but still, it felt like a good cultural moment. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, I think this thing about confirmation, like we do read, you know, we either, that morning coffee phenomenon, we're not quietly reflecting and seeing just that space of seeing what shows up,
Right.
and I think that's one of the big benefits of meditation is that it slows the mind down enough so that you can see what shows up when it shows up. It goes back to that conversation my wife was having with me about, you know, the universe is always speaking.
Right. Yeah.
When we get confirmation about something from the universe, we're like, wow, but it's always confirming
Yeah.
something and we just don't hear it. We're not sensitive enough to hear it.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
and meditation's a great way to training the brain to be sensitive enough to hear that stuff. Um, yeah.
I like that about how you like the meditations you lead on Facebook that I've participated in. I like how you bring, it's like, it's not making the presence of thoughts wrong. It's like a waterfall, just noticing the thoughts that are coming. I think you use the
Yeah.
imagery of a waterfall, but there's something about the practice of that is like, the point is to see the thoughts. And if you approached meditation that way, for example, you could sit with, like, you could really show up and be like, I don't know what's going to be here. Let's just see what thoughts are flowing. And I feel like that's where you can really get access to some things you otherwise wouldn't have if you were trying to go in with confirmation. I'm here to confirm the thing I want, and I'm reading this book to get the thing that I want, versus I'm just going to sit with my thoughts and see what shows up. I don't even know what's going to show up. And I kind of like that.
Yeah. That it's also one of the great outcomes and why I think the team has doubled its production out of the mindfulness work is
Oh, right.
um, they when you stop when you stop resisting what you're thinking about, when you stop trying to force that thing about the other thing about the great thing, Chris, about what you were sharing about the morning coffee thing was like, I know what I want. I'm here to get it. Let's get it. That's a very slippery slope from that down to 3 a.m. ice baths, like 75 hard. It's a
Uh,
very easy, that's the normal hustle culture way to get that. I'm going to spend my first reading 10 pages of something inspiring, and I'm going to write my gratitude journal. And I'm going to get all that shit, right? Because I'm going to get my mind right,
yep.
get what I want, um,
Yeah.
which is really 180 degrees from I'm going to sit,
Mm.
notice the
Uh-huh.
thoughts that show up with no judgment and no attachment,
Mm. Mm.
and just let my mind rest and
Wow.
just notice.
Yeah.
And when the mind gets the chance to rest, I mean, it's so funny because in the West, we just don't, I mean, we barely get enough rest for our bodies.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, we're really like, oh, CEOs get 5 hours of sleep or 4 hours of sleep, and right, like that's the whole fucking model. That's
Right.
the whole model is how
Mhm.
little rest you can get, right, and how busy you are, and all that shit. Versus, I'm gonna watch the leaves change color and
Mm.
see what happens. And the team doubled its production by grinding less.
Wow.
I
Yeah.
mean, it's
Yeah.
just fucking wild to me. And you can't even pin the results on the meditation, because if you did, you'd be ruining the whole thing. You then
Yeah.
turn it into a tool to get more. And that's
Uh-huh.
absolutely not what it is. It's just when you I need to get more out of the space, more can show up.
Yeah. Wow.
Right? You get the resistance out. You get that I'm going to sit here and read because in this book are the answers to the fucking thing that's stopping me from getting what I want. When the thing that's fucking stopping the thing from what I want from showing up is the need to get it out of this book.
Yes. That's so good.
It wants to come to you. Now we're getting Esther right back in. Here comes Abraham like a fucking tidal
Woo!
wave,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
That's so good.
But that's what she's talking about. And
Huh.
it's right there. It literally just happened with the team. I told you about that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It's awesome.
Yeah. I just wrote
I
about it for Inman too, so it'll be out.
Oh, nice.
Um,
I don't remember if you. I feel like if we didn't record it, you and I definitely talked about just the side eye of like, keeping it in the
yeah,
peripheral. Like you can't stare straight at it and be like, I'm going to use gratitude and meditation to get a result, and yet creating the space
yeah.
can turn into a
Well,
result.
okay, so this is good,
Yeah.
Chris. So this is really, this goes back to the Donna conversation and
Mm,
the generosity conversation, because as I'm talking about Donna and generosity with people, the idea behind Donna, or one of the ideas, I'm not going to claim to know the idea behind Donna, okay, but one of the ideas that I've taken away from it, from what I've learned about it, is it takes the conversation of the value of what's the value of this out of the space for the provider. Like, I
hmm
don't need to put a price on this. This is priceless. This is just what it is.
Yeah.
Okay. It's not in the domain
Yeah. Right.
of a value the way you think of value. It
hmm
has, it is the value of sunrise. It is the value of
Yeah.
still morning at the lake with a cup of coffee and no one talking to you. It's the value of holding your newborn. There's no value in that. There's no
Right.
monetary value in that. You cannot put a monetary value on those things.
Right.
It's just they are what they are. And if you're giving what you have from the space of, look, this is just, it's just, sunrises aren't given to be valuable even.
Yeah.
Sunrises are just doing what sunrises do, right? And you
Mm,
can just get in the space of, look, I'm just communicating what there is to communicate. It's up
yeah.
to you to say how much that is. I am uninterested in attaching my value, a value to that.
Yeah.
This is
Mm,
for you, and then you live your life from that space, right? That's then the heart of generosity, is to be in that space of
mm, mm.
I'm just going to give. You sort it out on your end. What, you know,
Yeah.
is that of value to you? And would you like to see more of that? Would you like to see other people have that? Is there something you can contribute that would be of value back, right? Like
Yeah.
if it's a
Yeah.
sunrise, then maybe you know, clean up the mountainside so that when you leave, someone else can enjoy it or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Um, so there's that aspect of it, but there's also the aspect of generosity. And this showed up for me this morning is generosity also brings with it for me, in my experience, a fear, scarcity, vulnerability.
Mm.
To give generously with an open heart is the chance to get it rejected.
Mm.
So there's a vulnerability for me in generosity.
Mm.
There's a definitely a scarcity because generosity brings forth, well, I don't have enough to give.
Mm.
Usually that's in
Right.
the financial domain, but sometimes it
Yeah.
comes up as time as well.
Mm.
Um,
Sure.
I'm not, if I give it, I won't have it anymore
Mm.
and I need it.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So there's that level of push and play that comes up when I think of generosity.
Mm.
And I think those things are really interesting to play with and to notice. I do not have resolutions for those, but I am confident that those are thoughts, feelings,
Mm.
worlds in which I could consider obstacles to experiencing generosity as generosity.
Yeah.
That's what there is to notice and be aware of and be present to is that and that was ultimately my connection to gratitude, the connection between gratitude and generosity came from. So there's the obvious connection, which is anytime I'm grateful, it's clearly because something or someone was generous with me.
Mm.
That's what you're grateful for,
Mm. Yeah. That's
is
good.
you're in the presence of some form of generosity.
Huh.
Anytime you're grateful, holding your newborn,
Love that. Yeah.
right?
That's good. Yeah.
Sunrise, a gift of anything. If you're standing and if you're grateful,
Yeah.
you could easily find what the generosity is that
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah.
But the other side to me was a little bit was interesting, was a little bit hidden, was every time I've given generously, and this definitely is if you've ever assisted or served generously, like with no expectation, just
Yeah.
serve because you did it with an open heart and you just did it to serve, to be of service, and you were just there to serve, like you didn't have
Mm.
any reservations about it, and that's what you were present to.
Mm.
You took the time to be present to. This is an act of service, not an act of obligation, because you can, I waited
Right.
tables for years, and you can certainly serve as an obligation or as a duty.
Uh,
This is service as an act of generosity.
mm.
When you serve as an act of generosity, never mind the gratitude the other person is experiences or doesn't experience because they do or they don't.
Yeah.
But when you serve as an act of generosity, invariably you're left present to the gratitude for the opportunity to serve.
Mm.
I mean, every time I assisted, every time I've ever led an introduction,
Mm.
every time, 30 years of doing this, 30 fucking years, there hasn't been one time I've ever assisted where I wasn't left grateful for the opportunity to have done it.
Wow, man. That's really confronting for me. You're saying that. I'm just noticing. One, I noticed that there are times in my life where I can find the feeling of I was volunteering, giving for just for the sake of it, and it felt really good. And the flip side of that is I can think how much of the things I do in order to get something or get somewhere, and how taxing that is, how exhausting that is. Like uh and yet the flip side, the feeling of how good it feels for me to give generously without and in order to. And Wow, like I just think the whole, this is probably what in some ways what's behind hustle culture. Like is there's a the whole thing behind hustle culture. A whole thing behind hustle culture is in order to. I'm going to hustle in order to get the Lamborghini. I'm going to hustle in order to get the two comma club trophy. I'm going to hustle, and it's taxing, it's exhausting, and you don't get the benefit. I don't get the benefit of the generosity I feel, the gratitude I feel for the act of doing it. I actually only feel ground down in the doing of it.
It's great.
Damn,
That
damn.
space of in order to is really the opposite of trusting.
Yeah,
It's,
yeah,
you bring the wood, I'll bring the fire. It's not going to work that way. No, relationships don't work that way. You've got to trust. You've got to know that. And that's
mm,
the great thing about meditation or just wandering in the woods or just sitting, is that there's a level of trust that shows up. Like the universe is going to provide the next step here. And you're
yeah, man.
cultivating that world so that if I'm giving generously, I can't get hurt. I, I can't, like
Yeah, 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 yeah.
you may not accept my generosity, but I'm not giving it to you to be accepted or not. I'm giving it to you because it's me. It's my expression to give it. There's no in order to here.
I think that challenges, like if you know how like in consulting we'll go five levels deep. So what's important about this? What's important? We're going levels deep on this because I feel like underneath that is your relationship, my relationship to whether I actually believe the universe would provide for me or not. And my behavior would suggest I don't believe that.
Right.
Intellectually, I'd say, yeah, man, the universe is benevolent. Like yeah, man, Abraham, the universe is for me. It's all great. And yet how I show up to the work of my business is very much if I don't do it, like no one's coming to save me, right? That's a pretty popular thing right now in hustle culture. Like no
Yes.
one's coming to save you, man. You got to do it for yourself. And so there's this very real, I would say, debate. It's not like we're consciously having this debate, but there's this very real. What do you believe? Do you believe that because I do feel like I believe it. I don't trust it. Like I believe that if I were to show up in a spirit of generosity, and let's just say, just take any of the things I'm doing, the communities, the podcasts, the coaching, the programs, and I really just was fully in my body about I want to give this to you, and it lights me up to do so. That the energy of that would be fucking magnetic. People would be like, God damn, this is exciting, man. Like you just are so generous and it feels good to be in your space. And they would tell people and there'd be referrals and people like it would, and it wouldn't be because I was directly eyeing, I want your referrals. Just like I'm not directly eyeing that I'm trying to get something from my meditation. Like I'm just giving. And I just really do believe in a way that's like, this can't be wrong. This idea can't be wrong. That if I shared this way, um, I would be tapped into something magnetic. And
Yeah.
yet my brain goes, my logical side goes, I don't know how that's going to work. I don't really know that that's how it works, you know?
So, whew, it's really good. I mean, so first of all, the thing about mindfulness and Donna, I heard it in what you said is mindfulness. Okay, I'm going to say it this way. It's not 100% accurate, but mindfulness really must be given for free,
Mm, mm.
because otherwise you're preaching something you're not practicing. I mean,
Yeah, right.
you're charging, you're literally saying I can't get generosity isn't the source of
Yep,
life. You
yep, yep,
just
yep.
go out and live a generous life, but this costs $50 for you to get that information. It just doesn't. It's crazy. You can't do that,
Yeah,
right? You really. So and one of the seven principles of mindfulness, or whatever number of principles you want to land on, is
yeah.
trust.
Mm,
Um, so there's this space of intellectually trusting
yeah.
and intellectually knowing
Mm,
and experience.
mm,
And a friend of mine was sharing me at my last insight meditation. My good friend was sharing one of the pieces of the Dharma, that there's three kinds of knowledge. There's information, there's intellectual, and there's insight.
mm, mm,
And you're talking about intellectual. So, you're talking about intellectually understanding you intellectually know that,
Yeah.
you know, but you don't have yet the physical insight, the opening, the experience,
Mm,
that's what that is.
right. Yeah.
And that's fine. I mean, that's just to until even to, but you may have even got an insight that you do know that you don't know that you don't know it on the level of insight, right?
Yeah. Right.
And that's the beauty of taking things to the cushion. I mean, the big thing in the forum was always, don't believe this. I mean, it was really like, don't fucking believe this. There's nothing to believe here.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
do not believe this. The Buddha said, if you meet the Buddha on the trail, kill him. There is nothing to believe.
Mm,
You either have the physical insight, the actual experience of it, or it's worthless. You can't,
yeah.
it's why understanding is the booby prize. It's why in hustle culture, that whole thing about, um, it's funny because the way we go about it in hustle culture is, wake up at 3 a.m. That's the answer to
Hmm.
have no excuses,
Right.
right? Is to figure out how to do more, right? Which is fine. I mean, on one hand, if I take my contempt out of that, right, it's a path.
Yeah.
The other side of it, though, is rather than try and find ways to do more, what if you found ways to be better?
Yeah.
I mean, that's really what we're talking about is like, okay, well, I'm not going to go to work on doing more stuff. I'm going to work on being, which doesn't mean I don't have to do anything. It just means who's doing it
Mm, mm, right.
is
Right.
no longer encumbered by the
Yeah.
whole in order to existing framework for how to produce results. I'm not
Right.
afraid. I mean, I just noticed in that world of generosity how afraid I am that I don't have enough to give.
Right.
And if I give it, I'll run out. And I think that's now something for me. I now have that as I now know that that's there for me experientially,
Yeah.
but I haven't yet done anything with that. And that's the next thing for me to bring to the cushion and look to see all sides of it till I'm done resisting those aspects of generosity, those fear and scarcity conversations. And that'll take as long as it takes. But I'm really fairly confident that once I disappear those things, there'll be a space of generosity that's available that's simply not available now to me.
Yeah. Right.
And
Right. Yeah.
cool, let's go. And it's hardly like, oh, I'm going to do that in order to get more from that's
Right. Right.
that's not
Well, side note on
happening.
just, the power then of having space. We'll go back to spaces
Mhm.
where a new conversation or a new context can show up.
Yeah.
Like right now, there's a lot of spaces you can go to be inside of learning how to hustle. There's a lot of places and spaces where you can go learn how to wake up at 3 and take an ice bath and then, and then fast and then do keto and then do like you just do all this stuff. There are not a lot of spaces. And there's a real practical uh, benefit to having spaces where if this as a space, I just had that aha as we're talking, like, oh my God, like this is really confronting for me. And that showed up in this space, in this
Right.
conversation with you that was not there when we started recording, 40 minutes ago. So
And then just to go full circle, which is really where we get to put a pin in shit,
yeah,
is that's the point, is that what are the tools that we have as entrepreneurs, as CEOs, to actually begin to
yeah,
vision, to experience what are viable paths, what are the obstacles, what are the conversations we're having that are limiting our limiting beliefs. Where are they? What do they feel like? When do they
yeah,
come up? It, and there's rarely anything to do with those things except just experience them until they have the experience, until they have the
yeah.
experience of being heard,
Hmm.
and then they can let you go. Right? When you let things
Right.
be, they'll let you be. If you stop resisting them, they most often just disappear. They're just like, okay, that's another thought. Like,
Right.
like any other random thought, right? You don't.
Yeah. Yeah.
The analogy I like is, you ever see when someone's sticking their car a little too far out into the road and you're driving and they're coming out of a parking lot and you think I should just fucking take their front end off, this asshole can't doesn't know how to drive, but you
Oh yeah, all
don't.
the time.
Yeah, I know you don't. I do. Or Death Race 2000, pedestrian 3 points. I think that all the time, right? But I don't honor that thought. But that would be like, scarcity coming up, like pedestrian 3 points. Like I don't, it comes up, but it's not something that I need to do anything about. I don't hit pedestrians. But that kind of thing comes up in a space like this, in a dialogue like this. And that's really the purpose of the, how to live a grateful life community that we're starting. So there's the little plug for that. I think that then becomes a deliverable,
Yeah.
Chris. That was the
Yeah.
point of our brainstorming this
Yeah.
morning.
Right. Yeah. And a great place. That feels like a good wrap. I mean,
Yeah.
I would say those of you who can hear the benefit of being in a space where that is the conversation. It's not in an order to. It's a space to practice the conversation and see what shows up. And I think, Aaron, what you've done with the 9-week How to Live a Grateful Life in a Fucked Up World program is probably a great place to start.
Yeah.
If you're listening to this, you're like, I'd like to be in a space like that. The place to start would be in the 9-week program.
Yeah.
And then from there, you would know what kind of, you will have already been in the practice of practicing that space and then joining or applying for, however that's set up, a community that does that on a weekly basis would be a logical next step after being in the 9-week program. So
Great.
how do people learn more about the 9-week program?
They can go to thegratefulbreath.com. That I got to update that website because the next cohort doesn't start till May. But they can get on the wait list there.
Good. Love it. So there you go. Thegratefullife.com. Awesome.
Grateful Breath.
Thank you. The Grateful Breath. Us again, the Grateful Dead. And then I said life. And okay. So the Grateful Breath, because we breathe in meditation.
There we go. That's exactly right.
All right, friends. Thanks for hanging out with us here. Until next time, peace.
Peace.